Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today, I am joined by two wonderful guests. You may know them from their work on your favorite Star Wars games, Max Brooke and Luke Eddy. How are you both doing today?
Doing great. Happy to join you for a video.
I know it's been a long time, and since I've talked to you each before about various different things, and I know Max, I've talked to you about X-wing, and and Luke, I've talked to you about Legion, and we talked about plenty of things over the years. But for those of you guys watching that aren't familiar with these two folks and the excellent work that they have done, I would love to kind of give you guys an opportunity to kind of showcase the quick maybe the quicker version of what you've done, and what you've worked on. Max, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, the old resume
Right.
cliff notes.
Exactly.
So I started out at Fantasy Flight Games. That's how I got into the industry. I started out back in 2011 working on role playing games, actually. So I was on like Warhammer 40K role play, and then Star Wars role playing when that rolled out, and then I did the design for Legend of the Five Rings role playing.
Hmm.
And then around that I got pulled into the orbit of the minis room, and so I was working on X-wing for a while. I got to help out a lot with like playtesting on Armada. I didn't do a lot of direct work on it, although I did. I did a few. I threw out a few noodles that stuck to the wall over the years. And I never really got to work on anything Legion. I got to throw some noodles at the wall sometimes. Did a lot of technical editing for it and such. But yeah,
Absolutely.
so lots of those projects, and then since 2020, I've been freelance. So been working on lots of things, but the big one is Stonesaga, which we'll get to later.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's quite a bit to talk about with Stonesaga and Luke, and a lot of. I think I first met you playtesting for Legion. Tell us about how all that went for you and
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, we met in person at the first Gen Con that Legion was at.
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
Uh,
that's fun.
yep,
Yeah, no, that was a good
but
time. Yeah,
That was
that was a good time.
2017,
2019.
That
18,
I think that was
would have
19.
been
2019.
20,
Yeah,
2019.
19. Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, good.
Yep.
Before
Good
before the
times.
before the world can
Yeah,
changed forever,
the
right?
before
Exactly.
times.
Yeah, for
Before
so many
times.
reasons, it's the before times. But yes, um,
Exactly.
yeah.
But yeah, so I worked on Star Wars Legion. I joined the project right but before the core set was finished, so I helped Alex Davey on that, and then designed most of the expansions that came out for that game, all the way up until the Scum wave of expansions that was released pretty recently, actually.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely. So the
I
pikes are
started
your fault.
freelance.
The,
Hey, I cannot be 100% blamed for last minute changes that may have been made without my advisement.
oh, okay,
But
okay.
by and large, yes, you
Yeah,
can
okay. By and
blame
large,
the
yeah,
pikes on me. Yes.
absolutely. All right. Well,
But yeah, those were some really fun things to work on when they came out. A bit of a nightmare to get made.
certainly.
Just coming up with a new pseudo faction and all that, but the pikes, the Black Sun, the swoop bikes were maybe my favorite of those units. So
Oh yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I love those swoop bikes.
yeah.
Let me ask
Uh,
you. Let me ask you guys both a kind of a Star Wars related question. And I promise we're going to talk about Stone Saga, but like while we're on the subject, and I don't want to like ask it later, and then we're like, wait, why are we going backwards now? Um, since you guys both have a history that has been so involved in working kind of behind the veil in a lot of ways, and dealing with, seeing things that a lot of fans don't see with Star Wars now, like having, kind of moved to other areas. Do you still like? First off, do you still like kind of consume any Star Wars media? We've got so many shows and Disney Plus and things like that. And if so, do you look at it the same way?
I'll go first on this one if that's okay, Luke.
sure, yeah.
I had a long Star Wars cold turkey after I stopped working on Star Wars stuff. Not really out of any intention, but because I started seeing someone who's much more of a Star Trek fan,
Okay.
and
Mm.
so we went through all of the Star Trek I had not seen.
Oh, that
Um,
sounds like fun. There's a lot there.
there's a lot,
Yeah.
actually, it turns out, because I hadn't seen original series, I'd never seen the animated series, so So I haven't watched much Star Wars, but the one thing I went out of my way for, because I'm a big anime nerd, is Visions. And I don't know if you saw, but they just announced a second season of that.
I did see that was just now announced, as a matter
with
of fact.
Studio Mir doing one of them too, who did Avatar: The Last Airbender, my favorite show ever.
Oh, that's a great show. That's a great show.
I'm
that Dave
super,
Filoni also worked on.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm super stoked for the second season of Visions, because I thought the first one was just a ton of fun and all these great different styles. But other than that, I'm pretty behind on Star Wars stuff. I really want to see Andor, though. I love the idea of a John le Carré novel in Star Wars. I think that's such a great premise.
Oh yeah. It was unexpected. I didn't expect Andor to be to like it as much as I did, and it was a very pleasant surprise. Yeah. What about you, Luke?
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Yeah, I sort of took a bit of a Star Wars hiatus, if you will. I mean, there's like, I've talked about this with other people who have worked on the game. I mean, like Gavin Duffy, who who's a producer. Like,
right.
there's like a part of your brain that sort of like turns on when like some sort of media content is so like a part of your work. It's hard to like I was watching like Book of Boba Fett, and like almost every episode was like, oh, is that a thing that could be a unit in Legion? Oh, is that a new kind of weapon that could be a heavy weapon in Legion? Right. There's like a part of your brain that's really hard to turn off when you've been doing it for that long. I mean, at least with X-Wing Max, it was just ships. But
yes,
like Legion,
exactly.
Like anything could, potentially be in Legion. So it took me. I had to take a break. It took me a while to sort of recalibrate, but I've been hearing so many great things about Andor. I have yet to watch it, but it's like at the top of my list. I mean, of the non-original trilogy films, I mean, I'd say like Rogue One was my favorite. So I'm excited that they're not just Dave Filoni's great, and Jon Favreau, but like I'm glad to see that they're also branching out into some like shows with other tones to them.
Definitely, yeah. No, it's been a very interesting time between the animation, the live action, and all the stuff that's coming. And I'm kind of hoping they get back to movies. And I know that that's certainly on the horizon. I kind of miss the whole theater experience and going to like an opening night of a Star Wars film. A lot of good memories from those, but yeah, I always thought it would be really interesting, especially like if I ever stopped creating content, would I look at the games that I loved the same way? Like, oh, something just got announced. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to talk about that, and I feel like it would be weird, so I don't know if I could shut my brain off that way, but it would be, I don't even know what that would feel like. So thanks for letting me pick your brain for a moment.
So what's the best Star Wars thing we've missed? What's of the last year? What's the highlight for you?
Oh goodness, that's a tough one. There have been there was an episode of The Bad Batch in the second season that I really was impressed with. Andor had its amazing moments. It wasn't a 10 out of 10 for me, but it was probably like an 8.5 out of 10 as a whole, but with some really high moments.
I mean, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, Book of Boba Fett. Honestly, Book of Boba Fett appeals to the Legion player in me, especially the end, because as well, I hope it's not too spoilery, but to say that Pikes were very important in that particular show. So like they're especially as Shadow Collective came out and you're watching this, you're like, oh, I need this to show up, and and so that it really lit up those cylinders in my brain. But I think Andor's probably, although Obi-Wan, I really liked Obi-Wan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a good one.
It had some highlights.
Yeah, it did a lot of great things.
I haven't seen it, so I can't judge. But seeing Ewan McGregor back in the role has got to pay for a lot on its own, right? Because he's
100%.
He's such a great part of those prequels.
Yeah.
He puts a lot of scenes on his back. Yes. Doesn't always quite make it, but he's always trying. So
Yeah, there are certain moments, and I think all of these shows have at least a handful of moments that stand out in your mind. Like if I was watching it in a theater, these would be the moments where like the audience like stands up and claps or hoots and hollers, and and I love moments like that. And these shows are actually able to bring that out too. I'm kind of currently going through Willow, which is not Star Wars, but also like Disney Plus and a kind of a similar theme. And I really like in a lot of the media they've been doing.
I watched the original Willow a couple weeks ago. I'd never seen it before. That movie is wild.
It is pretty wild. I mean, it's kind of the hero's journey in a different format, but it's I think it holds up pretty well over time compared to some other films from the era.
It's quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. I mean, I love the claymation dragon turtle.
Yeah.
Like that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a great use of Val Kilmer.
Oh
Uh,
gosh, Val Kilmer is the great. I absolutely, yeah. He was so fantastic in that movie too. It's crazy.
and it's nice to see Warwick Davis get to be in a leading role. You
Oh
know, that's actually a
yes.
lot of fun too because he's great in that movie. I assume he's good in the series too, but he's great in
Oh
that
yes,
movie.
and he's showing his diversity as well, and it's kind of cool to kind of see Lucas was jumping, from science fiction to a different era into kind of more of the fantasy, more of the real world stuff, which I think is kind of a good segue for us to start talking about something that's sort of jumped from a science fiction into more of a real world or possibly fantasy world, or a very mysterious world.
Definitely some fantasy.
Definitely some fantasy world in here,
Yes.
but a lot of real world inspiration too.
All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into Stonesaga. And I'm going to change up the background. We're going to do a little bit of movie magic. There we go. So it's just so we have some background stuff here. Stonesaga is it's a new game that you both have worked together on. This is coming to Kickstarter Tuesday, which, if everything goes right, should be tomorrow. And provided this video goes right at the right time, But Tuesday, this is going to Kickstarter. Tell me a little bit about Stonesaga, or tell the audience a little bit about Stonesaga.
Absolutely. So Stonesaga started with that thing that's right in the middle of your screen, not the box, but down below it, that cave wall image. Brendan had this concept, and that's actually on the inside of the box, although I think we give you a pad of them as well in the game box. But he had this concept of, like, what about a board game where you draw on the inside of the game box, and it's like the wall of a cave, and you're making a cave painting. And that was kind of like his initiating idea. And he reached out to me, and we had a couple of phone calls just kicking around, like, what would a prehistoric fantasy game look like? What might you do?
Yes.
And then we talked that around, and then there was this fallow period where he was kind of pitching it at Games. It went through the thing, and then he comes back to me and says, "Oh, we're going to make this," and so that's where it got started. So it's a prehistoric fantasy game, and it sort of revolves around this concept of leaving your mark on the world, the way your society changes the world it lives in, the way the world you live in changes your society, the interplay between those two things. This is a big game. There's a lot in here, and I quickly realized I was in over my head and needed some help. So I called up Luke and said, "Luke, please bail me out."
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fortunately for me, you designed a game so large you couldn't make it yourself. But yes, so Max and Brendan from Games had sort of concepted this idea first. And Max, you had begun doing this work before I did. And then when I started, I was sort of looking around for stuff, and one of the first things was you getting in touch with me and saying, like, "Hey, would you like to work on this thing that is totally different from the Star Wars miniatures games you have been doing?"
I think I said, "Luke, do you want to come work with me on a really weird board game?"
Yeah, and I was like, you had me at weird. But it has been really fun to work on because it is so different than, I mean, Max, maybe for you, there's a little bit of overlap between some RPG elements and what some of what we're doing in Stonesaga, but still it's a different genre. And for me, certainly. And like, as much as I loved working on Star Wars and working on something that was like, you sort of released iterative expansions for, like, having the freedom to just like come up with whatever you want for this sort of new weird setting IP that we can do whatever we want in, and it's cooperative, was a ton of fun. So like there's some like fun, weird, cool stuff going on here. So it's very much sort of a, like, I mean, I don't know a lot of games that are like their theme category would be prehistoric fantasy, but that's very much what it is, with like a lot of realism going on at the same time. So one of the main things that I helped out with was taking over working on the crafting system for the game.
Okay.
And so you've probably seen all the tokens, the crafting tokens with the little colored pips on the side that are codes.
Those are over on the right.
Those are over here. Yeah, these are inventory stuff, and these are the crafting tokens here. Yes.
Yeah. So those there's some sort of sort of fantastical things, like the 3 rock elements aren't like real world rocks, but they're sort of analogous to some. Like the sunstone is a rougher stone, almost more like a sandstone. The hard cloudstone, the blue one, is kind of like a granite maybe, and then the stone that you can flake and make into like arrowheads, riverstone in this game, but in real life that would be like flint or something like that.
Right.
But you combine these materials together mostly in almost entirely in like logical orientations to mostly get sort of real world tools and technologies that Neolithic peoples would have had, things like spears and adze and
there's some trial
hammers and clubs
and there's some trial and error, isn't there? Because I noticed, so I recently did, if you guys haven't already seen, I recently did an unboxing of the prototype. By the way, this is all gorgeous already. So even as a prototype, I mean, we're looking at fantastic components here. And one of the things I noticed is that I think this is it here. It's like a recipe book.
The codex.
I think that's the journal.
I think that's
the journal. It's the journal for you to like if you succeed, you're like, oh, look at this. Here's a recipe. I noticed this. So it's like what my thought was, and let me know if if I'm close to the mark here. I imagine a game, because I wanted to ask you about some of your inspirations for this, but this is going to lead into the same question. So maybe it's a 2-parter question. But, I wanted to know what some of your inspirations were, because when I looked at this, one of the things that jumped out at me is like, I wonder what it would have been like as, playing on a PC, playing a game like Minecraft in survival mode before you had the Minecraft Wikipedia to tell you what to do. Right. And that was an idea. Like, I'm looking at this recipe book. I'm like, oh, you're going to have to actually make your own notes, and, how close am I to the mark on this? And was that part of maybe what kind of helped
there was
inspire
definitely an inspiration there. So just to give a 30,000 foot view of the game. So it is a cooperative survival crafting game. It takes place in a prehistoric fantasy world. You take on the roles of these characters, and your characters will age and die over the course of numerous games. So you're playing every game as kind of a big pivotal moment for your society, and it takes place over numerous generations and even numerous epochs. So the early games will be hundreds or thousands of years. In the early games in the campaign will be hundreds or thousands of years before the later games in the campaign.
Oh boy. So this is this game is going to last you for hundreds of thousands of years. So definitely play
in real life. Yeah.
In real life, yes. In real life, if you play at the rate my D&D group schedules, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Go ahead, Luke.
Oh, I was just going to say that Crabbok. I mean, there was a lot of inspiration that went into this game, and like that feeling of sort of like video game crafting before all the rules was definitely one of them. I mean, there's something special about like the first time you play any video game where you're like haven't looked up anything up yet and like are learning not just how to play the game, but like accruing the sort of like game knowledge of like how the game works and what the systems are.
Right.
Yes. And I think Stonesaga captures a lot of that too. I think it also captures something I like about like crafting survival games. When you first start that fresh new character, it's like every little thing you find is like, oh, I found a stick. What's this? I mean, later you might be like, well, I don't need 20 stacks of 30 sticks. But in that early sort of stage, anything you find is like new and exciting, and like, what can I do with this? What can I make? What is it used for? So I think Stonesaga absolutely captures a lot of that feeling.
That kind of leads me to one of my next things that I wanted to talk about with you guys, that an aspect of this that is really cool. And it's, you mentioned like having a stick, or, how many times have I played some kind of RPG where I'm like, oh, I need to hold on to this. I need to hold on to that. I need to hold on to everything. And you're limited by that with like, this is you like your bag, correct?
The
like
horrible bag.
Yeah. And so like, I'll do like a quick demo. Like, these are things that all you can put in your bag. Now stop me if I get something incorrect, effect, but I'll just grab a couple of these tokens.
Oh yeah, those
And
are all valid.
and
Yep,
and
those
so
go in
like
the
so
bag.
I've got all these resources, and I want to hold on to this, and at the start it'll be fine, but then as I start to get more and more, and now I have to like push them in there, and it's it's a little harder to do on
Yep.
Tabletop Simulator, but you get the idea. Like you're gonna have to like, all right, let me move this around a little bit. How many? Let me try
Yeah,
rotating these
this is
things.
part of the game that is not tabletop simulator friendly. It's much better in real life. But
Yeah,
yes,
and I showed a little bit of this in the unboxing, where I could actually have my hands on it and to manipulate these a little bit. But that is just I thought that this was like completely revolutionary to actually have a clever, and also I'll admit maybe potentially frustrating inventory management system that I've never seen before. Like what were some of your thoughts with this, and
well,
are all the characters
I'm
have the
glad
same bag
you.
size?
Yes.
They do,
Okay.
yes, yeah. That doesn't change.
Hmm.
But I'm glad you like it because this is one of the things I've really enjoyed about working with Max. And we would do this while we worked at Fantasy Flight together.
Yeah.
Somebody would always make the joke suggestion of a bad mechanic.
Hmm.
There'd always be the joke of like, oh, let's make a new X-wing upgrade. That's if you hit if your shot hits, your opponent has to buy you a beer.
Oh yeah.
Things like that. But what's great is a lot of our like joke bad suggestions between Max and I. One of us makes the joke, and the other one is like, "Well, wait a minute."
Oh
So
yes, yeah, love it.
originally there was just a grid where how many items your character could carry, and then I don't even remember which one of us it was, Max, but one of us made the joke that cavemen don't have grids. So
I don't remember who said it, but
like,
somebody showed up and was like, "Cavemen don't have grids."
yeah, and
That's
I was like,
true.
what if we trolled the players and just gave them this annoying amorphous shape they have to fit their tokens in?
And that's something I noticed too. That like the shape is so like non-standard, but actually really looks like the silhouette of a bag too. And so it just allows for so many really like, oh, I can almost fit the mushroom in here. Yeah,
So
there's so many things that can almost fit. I love it. It's so cool.
part of the reason that mechanic stuck too is that you don't actually have to reconcile your inventory like immediately all the time. So the game is split into day and night phases. And so during the day phase, you move around, you spend those yellow energy tokens on your board to take actions.
Right, these
You
right
do
here.
stuff interacting with the terrain, and then at the end of the day, you have the night. Sort of the board pushes back on you in various ways. It's kind of like night in Minecraft. All of a sudden, you're like, where did that creeper come from?
Right.
Not literally. We haven't made an exploding enemy yet. Although Luke, let's make
Not
a note
yet.
of that.
We haven't seen all the stretch goals, or I don't know what all the Kickstarter is going to show us. Who knows what might be? I know I've.
Exactly. But one of the key things is you don't actually have to reconcile your bag until the night phase. So while other people are taking their turns, you can be fiddling with your inventory to trying to get everything to fit.
And that's
So
a really great thing. I think a lot of multiplayer games suffer from it's not my turn. I have nothing to do. Let me pull out my phone. And having this it really gives you something to keep you engaged until it's your turn again.
Another thing we found too is as people get more experienced at the game, especially if you have like a 4-person table rather than like a 2-person table, you can really start to thread your turns because each of the activities uses a different set of components. So like there's a bunch of these are on the left. You've got the the foraging decks, which are sort of a little push your luck game where you draw cards and try to find resources you want while avoiding predators. There's the delving activity, which is kind of like a choose your own adventure game. There's the fishing activity, which is a little bit of like a betting game, almost like a very simplified version of roulette. And then there's mining, which is another one that doesn't work super well on Tabletop Simulator, where you put tokens into the bag and then feel around for them and try to find the right shapes you want.
Yes.
And so you can be doing these.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
To your point, you can start to. I was just going to say you can start to overlap these. And yeah, I mean, a nice little thing, Max. I feel like we tried to do a lot of nice little quality of life things. Like, for example, the rule on taking turns is that players can take their turns in any order. It doesn't matter. We just say don't have one player just take all their turns in a row because that's boring. But otherwise, yeah, go ahead, feel free, whatever order you want to do it in.
Sure. All right. Yeah. Very cool. You mentioned like some of the terrain and moving around and the terrain pushing back, which I want to talk about. This is also something that I think is really cool. The way that you guys have terrain now. You've got like different biomes. I kind of want to talk about those a little bit. And you have these awesome terrain trays that allow for hexes, and I know these two are both starting hexes, but like they allow you to put them in here and kind of grow your game board. Like, because this is basically the board, right? And it can potentially expand, and this is sort of a 4X element to this game. The exploration is kind of lived this way, and like the tiles are. I loved this in the unboxing that I was able to do. The tiles, like they have their upside down side, and you can kind of see them a little bit. And it's almost like I can see in the distance. Oh, look! There's gonna be trees over. All I know is that there's trees over on that side until I flip it over. War. Yeah, it's a really clever fog of war where it's not just 100% black. I can't. It's not completely unknown, but it's mostly unknown, and I think that's really cool.
I think this one was Brendan's idea. Mm-hmm. I think he came up with that one, right? Or was it you or Brendan? I think it was Brendan who came up with the fog of war, right?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think we iterated on it a bit to get it to the right kind of opacity that we wanted. But it's a fun, it's fun to have that little hint, and I think it works so well because, and this is something really, I think like Max, you and Brendan, like it was a big part of your initial concept of the game was that like so much of it is art driven, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could have tiles where it's like written out what's on the tile, or there's icons on the tile, but like everyone was on board with like, let's just get some like really good clear art, so that when you lay it all out, it like looks like a world or a map. It doesn't look gamified.
I love how these kind of flow into each other also, and there's a lot of different options. If you've ever played some like of the Civilization-esque type games, they're very, I don't know, like a grid where it feels a little bit more computerific, and this feels just so much more like natural, like an actual map.
And so one thing to point out, one of the things, Brendan, we went through a lot of map iterations. Like there was a version, I think this was before you came on the project, Luke, but there was a version where Stonesaga was like a roll and write, where you drew all the like map stuff yourself, and we were like, can we give you stencils in the box? Is that a thing we can do? We went through a whole series of like, that was an early iteration that didn't get very far because Brendan and I were both bad artists, so we were quickly able to determine it was not a good idea. At least not for the game we wanted. I'm sure somebody could make that game very cool. Mm-hmm. But then there was a version where there were sort of these like inset nodes. I think I have like a bunch of screenshots of that version on my blog. Like the TTS note version of that. But one of the things we found was that, just having like a procedurality of like how things relate to each other is enough. Like each tile can be bespoke. And the board will feel quite different because it's like, oh, there's these two open edges connected, so it's easy to get through here. Oh, there's these like, this area has this like two resources next to each other. That's really nice. Or like this other one has these, doesn't have like any of this particular type of resource. It's a desert for, water or, whatever. Right. So you can end up with these like quite varied maps despite having a preset group of tiles. And then of course, when you get into the fact that you can have multiple biomes connect with each other, especially with these like, we originally had bigger hex trays with more hexes on them, which tended to feel a little sameier. But now that the terrain trays can connect in all sorts of different ways and they're smaller, like each one can be a little more modular. A very brief aside too, but so we felt strongly that we wanted, like, if it's in the art, it has rules, and if it is, if it has rules, it's in the art.
Right. These, like there's some that have mountains, some that have a cave, some that has forests and stuff like that. And like what do those really mean to the player? Is it just art, or what does
Yeah, so pretty much everything on there has implications, and there will be a full guide to what is on every tile in the back. So you won't need in the book. Will be a section that's just like tile, because each one does have a little component ID on it, and it'll just say like, this one has a mountain, a forest, a lake, and a river, or whatever. And so there will be there will be the argument settler in the back. Okay. But
I mean, currently there's nothing. There's no art elements on the tiles that is not a terrain you can interact with, other than just whatever's the like base color. For example, the grass you're seeing in all these is not a thing you can interact with.
And some of the textures in that, like those little like kind of rolling hills, those are sort of part of the background.
Right. So if you can see my hand kind of moving, like this is just part of the background, but the river is distinct, and the trees the forest is distinct, the cave is distinct. I would even go so far as to ask, these ravines here or this canyon is distinct. Okay, excellent.
It's one of the places you can go delving, or you can go look for rocks there.
Oh.
Yeah. Our artist has done a really good job with understanding that. Those like that little hill that you were pointing out, like that, making that sort of like, having that sort of fade into the background enough that like when I look at that tile, I'm not confused that that's like, oh, is that supposed to be like, a special kind of hill I can interact with? Like it's there adding texture, but it doesn't like stand out in the way that like the forest and the ravine and the river like pop out, so it's clear as a thing.
It adds more of a variance and a natural look to the grass, because nothing's completely uniform in nature, right? Like you didn't want to go with a grid for the bags, so that kind of fits, and you're seeing similar design with all of this. And the art is really fantastic. I mean, we not only the tiles, we have. I want to talk about the mantles here in a moment, but like the artwork on the cards is. I noticed the cards, even as a prototype, stood out as being very, very distinct from each other, as well as very vibrant. And so, like, I love the artwork that you guys had on the cards. It really stands out.
Our artist Andrea is really fantastic. I mean, another good, if you want to flip over one of the forage cards there on the left hand side, the woods or the plains, like that's another part of the game that is like super art driven. Like that's stuff you interact with, and none of it is icons. It's all just like individual pieces of art, like that. Those mice,
like this one has 2 mice, but this one has only 1, right? This one has a little fish.
That matters. That's actually 2 versus 1. Yeah, and that fish matters too. If you gather water there, you would get that fish. So you have to look for little details too. A tree might have a feather in a nest up in a branch. That's a thing. You would get a feather if you harvest wood from that tree.
I don't want to spoil anything too deep, but I mean, it goes even further. I will just say that you'll notice that the moon is visible in the sky.
I did notice that, yeah.
And that even might have some mechanical implications.
Oh, do you have to moon your opponent if you get a moon on a card?
We kept out those kind of bad ideas.
That's one of
those bad ideas we talked about earlier.
That's a house rule.
That's dependent on your local laws
where you're playing, right? Yeah, love it. Love it. No, that's wonderful. I want to ask you guys a little bit. We were talking about. You mentioned that your character can die, and I thought that was something that is really revolutionary. And we've seen some. There's legacy games have kind of shown up, and this it seems to me like there's definitely an aspect of this. There's legacy aspects to this game. So let's talk about the what a player who's going to say, well, I don't want my character to die. But they're not really gone, right? Like Luke Skywalker. I know I'm taking it back to Star Wars, right? No one's ever really
It's a good example.
Right?
It is a good example. So, to that effect, I think one thing to think about is that your character is to some extent, the character you play in a game is your character. Although you could play multiple characters in a game if you get eaten by a big monster or something. But your character you play in a game is not the character you play across the campaign. The character you play across the campaign is actually the society. And not only can your characters die, your characters will die, because frequently at the beginning
you sound like a supervillain right now, Max. How can you say that to me?
Well, I mean, it's funny, but like it's the inevitability of life, right?
Sure.
It's not necessarily a big monster that's going to get you. It's just time.
But there are big monsters too.
There are big monsters that might get you too. But at the beginning of each game, it tells you how much time has passed since the last game. And frequently that's a generation. And if that's the case, then you tick one of those age boxes that you just ticked on the character.
Right.
And so, Gorgonzola goes from young to old to a legend. And when Gorgonzola becomes a legend, you flip over that card. You'll have recorded Gorgonzola's stats on it and traits.
Yes, I didn't even look at the backside of the card. Look at this. You're filling me with so much wisdom right now.
Yeah. And game events may have told you to also illustrate symbols, which are very simple. Even I can draw them, and I'm not a good 2D artist. Taryn did a very good job making them all very visually intelligible.
Okay.
But these symbols you might have drawn that relate to their heroic deeds, and that card can then be accessed by members of your society in later generations to either use their stats or use their traits or tap into some heroic deed they did in some way. So over time, the characters you've played become these legends. So yeah, I mean, it is kind of like they're sort of like your Force ghosts, to go to the Star Wars.
I love it. Well,
example.
So maybe you'll be incentivized to like name certain characters instead of just naming them after yourself, since they will inevitably die. Maybe you name them after historical figures or Force or famous Jedi or something like that.
Exactly.
Or Darmok. That'd be a good name.
Oh, that would be a good one.
And Jalad?
Yeah, exactly.
When the walls fell.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I love it. Great reference. We're like all over the fandoms right now, which is wonderful because I love them all. So I thought that this was really cool, and so that you have your different mantles. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the storyteller, because as I was looking at the different mantles, they all seem like they make sense to me. Just there's a scout, and I'm trying to remember all the different names of them right now. But the storyteller stood out to me as like, well, this doesn't sound like a role or a job that I typically see in a game like this. So can we talk about the mantles a little bit and how they give each player like a different experience?
Luke, you want to talk about the role of oral history in pre-modern societies?
Yeah, well,
or shall I?
We were just.
I can touch on it. Actually,
go for it.
I'll bring up on my own screen here what some of the abilities are for them. But I mean, when we were talking about possible roles for characters, in game mechanics, we want to like pull on for what these roles can do. The thing we were just talking about, like those legend cards, is sort of an aspect mechanically, but also like an important aspect thematically that we wanted to like continue to draw on. Mm-hmm. So like one of the things that the storyteller can do is, I think, more than any other character or game ability, they have the most direct access to like gaining and using or giving to other players those legend cards we talked about, the reverse side of a character card to be able to use, to sort of like tell the story of that character who's now a legend and, draw on their strength, or their conviction or like one of their traits for a test. But, sort of like storytelling and myth come out in theme and mechanics in the game in other ways. Max was hinting at that moon that you saw in that one forage card. Omens are a big part of the game, and they're a big part mechanically, but they also like helped us sort of like do a lot of theming for the game, sort of a lot of world building. So there's 5 omens in the game: sun, moon, stars, comet, and clouds. And these all sort of come out in sort of various themes where other things are also associated with these. Like, for example, the hard blue cloud stone is associated with clouds. But then also there's this whole omen mechanic system where when you see these omens in art in the game, you can investigate them. This is something you look up in that codex we were talking about, and you can sort of discover something purely by just looking closely at what's happening in the game world. So they'll show up on forage cards, they can show up on hex tiles. You may be looking at the terrain and be like, well, wait a minute, that's not any of the normal pieces of terrain. That's some weird set of pillars that kind of look man-made or natural, not sure, but there's like a moon symbol in the middle.
Right.
And you would look them up in the component ID number in the codex and perhaps discover some sort of thing.
Very cool.
So this storyteller like mantle is sort of, again, pulling on sort of like themes we want to emphasize in the game beyond just the regular, like, I mean, they're good roles, but sort of like scouting or hunting or exploring,
Sure.
things like that
and it
are
seems
sort of
like
obvious.
a role that will become stronger as you play multiple sessions and as you develop more of a history to draw on. So, speaking of multiple sessions, how so for a game like this that is obviously designed to be run more as a campaign, it sounds to me like like running a one-off is probably going to be less of the experience than actually running the whole campaign. How like roughly like how long do you expect like a typical campaign to run? Like how many sessions, so to speak?
I talked to a lot of friends who play a lot of campaign games. I am not among those people who completed Gloomhaven personally,
Okay.
but I have friends who have, and I talked to them about what their ideal campaign length is. And even the people I know who finished Gloomhaven all said, please keep it under 30, and like preferably we'd like to be able to finish it in like 12 to 15 play sessions. So that I took that feedback, but I also wanted there to be depth of content too. And so one of the things we really worked on is we kind of drew from the roguelike genre here, where there are quite a few challenges your society can face, but you won't face all of them. And some of them are sort of optional. They're more like opportunities than like crises you have to deal with. So, in each of the game's 3 epochs, so the 3 like big chunks of time over which you play the campaign, you can finish an epoch in like 4 games, and it takes a maximum of 6 games. Now, there are also like side quests, these epoch goals that pop up as well, and those you might spend a game spending more time on the epoch goal than the main goal of the game.
Right. Well, just like a lot of RPGs, do we want to go for the end boss early, or do we want to, go help the old crone first? And with her thing, maybe she has a shiny new jewel for us that will help us. And I get
exactly. So if you want to get through it, you should be able to get through it in about 12 play sessions is the goal.
Excellent.
But if you want to really poke around in it, there's a lot in there, and you could play as many as 18 sessions in a single playthrough, and you could do multiple playthroughs, and you would see some of the same challenges over again, but you might have a pretty different sweep of your story, because the challenges might come up in a very different order that has different implications, or you might get different ones entirely. There are more challenges in each epoch than you can actually do in that epoch. So
you're not going to have to like destroy your game as you're playing it. Like it's not like a one-time playthrough and then you can't play it again.
It's very much a legacy-like game. So, we wanted to make sure that every component that you made unusable in the long term could either easily be replaced with we're going to have like a recharge pack, I think Brendan's calling it.
Okay, wonderful.
Where you can get more character cards, more outposts.
I know that's really big for a lot of people. Like so many people like either refuse to play legacy games or will like deliberately not rip them up and just put them in a separate envelope or the different things like that, or not write on something, or they'll use dry erase markers instead of pencils. And just because people are afraid to damage something, even they may only play once anyway, but it's more the principle of the thing. So having a recharge pack, I think, is such a cool idea.
Yeah, well, we very much want people to be able to give this game away to their friends if they want. Yes. We want this to be a game that can like remain in circulation, remain useful. One of the I like legacy games, but one of the bummers about them is always it's like, okay, yeah, we're done with this. I can't pass it on to someone else. Oftentimes, if I like have another board game, I play through it, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I hand it off to someone else, and they get some enjoyment out of it. But yeah, so everything, we have the recharge pack, but then also on top of that, everything that you need to replace can be replaced with like a note card or something.
Sure.
There's nothing
like these name cards. You could use a piece of paper. It wouldn't look as pretty, but you could make it
exactly. You could easily use like a note card or something like that. For the journal, you could use any old journal. You could even get your own much nicer journal if you wanted to get like a leather bound journal or something.
We all like to customize our games a little bit, repaint our pre-painted ships, or do kind of crazy things. So love it.
Exactly.
So there is well, I'll just chime in quick to say that there is an aspect of that legacy light that we're going for that I think I don't see a lot of games do, which is if you lean into like the little bit of legacy that you get to do. So like the characters and writing on the inside of the box, and even too, your settlements that you build, your outposts can become destroyed, and there are cards that
and these are
represent that it's been
things
destroyed.
like these, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Those. Yep. And then they have cards similar to character cards too that you write the name of the outpost on. And we give you more of those. But these elements of the game, when you pass it on to someone else to play, or even if you just play a second campaign, those elements can carry over if you want. Like those legends that existed from the earlier, era of Stonesaga, like those are still in the box, right? You can still draw on those in your new game or the game that your friends are playing, and they can also see sort of the illustrations you've made on your cave wall too. And there's even some
a really cool stretch
where...
goal. You could get like Luke Eddy's own legend in the thing,
That's a fun one. We'll talk to Brendan about that. We could put all
maybe season 2
and egg in there.
Yeah, maybe season 2 will get it. Maybe
there you go.
Yeah,
I play the game, and then one of the characters gets put into one of the boxes we ship out, like a golden ticket.
There you go. Oh my goodness, I love it. I love it. So this is coming to Kickstarter on Tuesday. What do people need to know about the Kickstarter if they're interested? Of course, we're going to get a link. We'll put that down in the video description. But what do people need to know about the Kickstarter? How long is it running? Anything else? Like, I think that is there anything else that we didn't that I didn't talk about that that you think that we need to address about the Kickstarter?
I don't think that we need to address. I mean, we'll have, I've seen our preview page. We're presenting a lot of good information, as clearly as we can. You'll see whatever the time is. You'll see what the different price points are. It's not a very complicated game with a whole bunch of different add-ons and things like that. There's some small, cool ones. I think we're going to have an add-on for... bonus. Well, I was going to say one of the add-ons is acrylic tokens for that mining mini game where you put the tokens in the bag and you feel them. But that's also an early bird incentive. So maybe that's the best thing to know is if you're thinking about it, if you want to pull the trigger on this, get in on getting those acrylic tokens, because like that's like a crazy good early bird too. Like acrylic tokens for all of those that you're looking at right now.
That is a big, because those are always like some kind of aftermarket or an extra purchase or whatever. So you're getting that just for backing right away.
Now I am looking forward to some fan making the actual rock versions of those.
That would be amazing.
That was a dumb idea that did not make it. That ended up on the cutting room floor. But
I think it'd be really cool if you did that. You put all those in there with the actual rocks, but you also put a miniature of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in there too. Then you could pull out. Which rock are you going to pull out? Yeah.
He's like the face on the back.
I did want to get some like scratch and sniff stuff in here, so you could even have like for the cooking.
Yeah, that
didn't. We could even have a thing where you can smell what the rock is cooking.
Nice.
That's great.
Well, actually, maybe that is one last thing to touch on that we haven't talked a whole lot about in sort of other videos we've done, is that there are going to be 2 expansions that you can also back. We've sort of announced one of them already because there was a poll on BGG to name it, or Game Geek, which is a cooking expansion, which will be really fun. So like all those food tokens you're interacting with, you just eat those.
I've got all of these.
We're gonna add a whole like combine them and cook them and make them into recipes.
Can I make a marsala sauce out of all these mushrooms? Oh, I love it.
Oh yeah, there you go. So
let's note that down.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. But I don't know, Max, have we said at any point what the other expansion is?
I don't know.
That's the one I'm really excited for.
I don't want
to. It sounds like it's a really exciting expansion. I think our viewers would love to hear about it, or at least a hint.
We'll drop a hint. We'll say. It has to do with more animals in the game.
Oh, that gives me all kinds of ideas. So now I have to like speculate on like the 10 different things it could be, like Crabbok's top 10 expansion ideas.
Top 10 based on, expansion ideas
based
with
on
more
animals. Yeah.
And it has, I think it has, I mean, all of the art that Andrea Corvashi has done for this game is amazing. But I think it has some of the most like interesting and inspired creature designs I've seen in ages. Mm-hmm. So it is a very exciting for fantasy animal lovers out there. You know, if you're you're big on your loth cats or your platypus bears or what have you, there's some really cool stuff in this game.
Oh, I mean, from the motif, the design, everything. Like, there's so many just creature comforts that I could think of that would just fit perfectly. And you can see some of these people are wearing different skins too, right? There's definitely lots of evidence of other creatures that I haven't seen yet. So who knows where else that could lead. That's super exciting. That is really cool. All right, well,
it's those giant chipmunks I think you mentioned in the unboxing.
The giant chipmunks. I don't think it was actually. I mean, it could be. You never know. No, I love it. I love it. All right, well, guys, I want to thank you so much, Max and Luke. Thank you for you sitting down with me, talking about Stonesaga. This is going to be on Kickstarter tomorrow. If you're watching this on Monday, if you're watching it, you may be watching this after the fact. But so make sure you check the link in the video description below. That'll take you to the Kickstarter page, whether it's the pre-launch or the active page, depending on when you're watching this. And you can get more information. I know you guys also have Games has a Discord that people want to ask you guys more questions directly, clarification on things, or just stay kind of in the loop on everything.
Or get access to this beta.
There you go. That's how I did it. That's how
I think it might be closed when the kick. Oh no, is it going to be open for part of the Kickstarter?
Well, you can ask in the Kickstarter comments section. There's a comment section on Kickstarter. If you pledge, you gain access to ask all kinds of questions and interact with the community there.
I do think this TTS beta is going to be available for at least part of the.
Yeah, I think it's still going to be up. You can't. The contest is over, but the beta is still available if you just want to check it out.
Yeah. And I think I honestly, and this is a really nice TTS module that you guys have created. It's like everything. Most of this is already in play. I know that's one of the it's something a lot of people who are looking to get a ground feel kind of a game. Having everything already set up, it's like you're at a convention and somebody's giving you a demo and they've already set it all up for you. So you can look at a stack of cards like this big and say all right, I don't know where all these are going to go. Do I need to shuffle them? Do I need to separate them? Are they in order?
Do I need to not shuffle them?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many of those, and it's it's really nice having this, and certain pieces are locked in, like the mantle boards are locked in, but I can pull the character card out and it automatically goes underneath. So, by the way, big I'm trying to write on it as I'm doing this. Big props to whoever designed this. Let them know I think they did a fantastic job. I love the way the tiles snap into this terrain tray. These terrain trays are super.
It's gotta have snap fits. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really great job. So I mean, your art team looks really good. All these things look really, really cool. I hope everybody checks out Stonesaga. I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what that mystery expansion is too. I guess we'll have to wait and follow the Kickstarter. And if you're not sure, you can also follow along. But you should definitely pledge the first day, even if you're on the fence. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I think that is gonna do it for our discussion. I don't know if did I miss anything else that that was super important, or I guess
no, I don't think so. This was great. Okay. We really enjoyed being on. Always a pleasure.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for chatting with me. Big thanks to all of you guys watching. Big thanks to all my patrons. You guys help make this channel possible. If you want to learn more, definitely check out the links in the description below. That's going to do it for today. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. Always wash your socks, and you can't take the sky from me. Cowabunga.